The world knows his name. It is a name synonymous with mass murder, global terrorism, and the most devastating attack on American soil in history. But the man who became Osama bin Laden was not born a terrorist. He was born into staggering wealth, a colossal construction empire, and a privilege that guaranteed him a future of comfort. So how did a privileged Saudi boy, who once loved Arsenal football, become the world's most wanted man? This is the life and times of Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was born on March 10, 1957, in the Saudi capital Riyadh. His father, Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden, was a highly successful Yemeni construction contractor who founded the Saudi Binladin Group, which rode the wave of Saudi Arabia becoming the world's largest oil exporter. The company grew into an enormously wealthy corporation, its influence stretching across the entire Arab world. Osama's mother, Hamida al-Attas, was a native Syrian and Mohammed's 10th wife. They separated soon after Osama's birth. Osama's childhood was one of extreme privilege. By the time he was born, his father was a multi-millionaire. That wealth would be in the billions today. While his parents divorced quickly, his father remained a major presence, instilling in Osama a deep, conservative religious fervor. He attended elite schools and even spent time in Britain in 1971, attending an English language course at Oxford University. Intriguingly, his early teenage years showed a mix of typical boy interests. He was a football fan who supported the English club Arsenal and had a deep interest in military history. The family business had immense connections to the Saudi royal family, winning contracts to manage repairs for the mosques in Islam's two holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. However, in 1967, Mohammed bin Laden was killed at age 59 in a plane crash. Osama, though too young to take over, was set to inherit a staggering fortune. He continued his education, entering King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah in 1976 to study economics and business administration. By this time, he was already married. In 1974, at age 17, he wed his first wife, his cousin Najwa Ghanem. She would be the first of at least 5 wives, and Osama would father over 24 children in his lifetime. He had no financial worries, set to inherit upwards of $30 million, fortune that would be worth hundreds of millions today. But as he settled into a life of ease and family, marrying his 17-year-old cousin at 17, and eventually fathering over 24 children, his attention was beginning to shift away from economics. He was listening to new voices that would reshape his vast fortune into a weapon. The mid to late 1970s were a crucial period for Osama's ideology. He began developing a pan-Islamist ideology, the idea that Muslims in all nations should be unified to defend their faith and roll back Western influence in the Middle East, particularly concerning the new state of Israel. The writings of Sayyid Qutb were a strong influence. Qutb, an Egyptian Islamic scholar, argued that Islamic jihad, struggle against evil, was justifiable for the creation of a new Islamic caliphate. His work was drenched in virulent anti-Western sentiment, denouncing the U.S. as materialistic and godless. Significantly, Qutb's brother Muhammad was one of Osama's teachers at Abdulaziz University. The ideology was in place: a global Islamic caliphate, Sharia law, and a war against the godless West. But the ideas remained just that, ideas, until a single event in 1979 provided the fertile ground for bin Laden to transform theory into bloody reality. That reality began 2,800 miles away, in the freezing mountain passes of Afghanistan. The Afghan Jihad, 1979. Osama finished his studies around 1979, the year the Soviet Union launched a full-scale invasion of Afghanistan to prop up a new socialist state. Even before the Soviet invasion, bin Laden traveled to Pakistan and quickly came under the wing of Abdullah Azzam, a Palestinian-born jihadist. Azzam encouraged bin Laden to join the tens of thousands of Muslim men heading to Afghanistan to fight the atheistic Soviet invaders. These fighters were known as the Mujahideen. In the early 1980s, bin Laden began using his inherited fortune to recruit and train Mujahideen. While his funding was significant, it paled in comparison to the billions of dollars spent by the United States and Saudi Arabia to equip anti-Soviet forces. Bin Laden even had limited contact with U.S. Special Forces at this time, as they were fighting the same Soviet enemy. The Soviet-Afghan War developed into a brutal guerrilla conflict, displacing 4 million people and resulting in at least 500,000 deaths. Bin Laden was a major figure, supplying goods and facilitating the movement of fighters. In 1984, he and Azam established Maktab al-Khidamat to raise funds from the Arab and Western worlds. By 1986, their network had trained hundreds of fighters. He had proved himself a warrior. He had successfully helped expel the Soviet superpower. But as the last Soviet troops retreated, Osama bin Laden saw not the end of a war, but the beginning of a larger global one. He took the battle-hardened survivors of the Soviet war, his fortune and his new ideology, and forged them into something far more dangerous: the foundation, the birth of Al-Qaeda. As the war against the Soviets wound down in the late 1980s, bin Laden and his allies looked to the future. Bin Laden and Abdullah Azam believed Maktab al-Khidamat should transform into a larger organization focused on continuing the expulsion of non-Arab powers from the Muslim world. In 1988, this more extremist wing resulted in bin Laden and Azam establishing Al-Qaeda, which means the base or the foundation. It would eventually become the world's largest jihadist organization. Al-Qaeda's goals were clear: to wage jihad against non-Muslims across the traditional Muslim world. Key points included removing American influence from the Middle East, destroying the State of Israel, inciting a major war against the U.S. to radicalize the Muslim world against the kafir, non-Muslims. The Gulf War and expulsion. Mikhail Gorbachev began withdrawing Soviet troops in 1989. Bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia to a hero's welcome, leveraging his power to grow Al-Qaeda. However, the friction between bin Laden's confrontational ideology and the Saudi government's role as a key American ally soon grew into a fatal breach. The rupture came on August 2, 1990, when Saddam Hussein of Iraq invaded Kuwait. The U.S. began building a coalition, and American troops headed for Saudi Arabia to use it as the staging post for the liberation of Kuwait. Bin Laden was outraged. He organized a meeting with King Fahd, requesting that Saudi Arabia prohibit American troops from assembling and offering to use his own Arab Legion from Afghanistan to defend the border. The offer was rejected. The U.S. buildup intensified. His offer to use his Arab Legion to defend the border was rejected, replaced by a massive American military presence. Bin Laden, in turn, unleashed a torrent of public denunciations against the Saudi royals for inviting Western infidels into the kingdom, the protector of Islam's two holiest cities. This defiance cost him everything. In 1991, the Saudi hero, the billionaire's son, was stripped of his citizenship and exiled, turning a war of words into a war of global terror. Terror attacks begin. Following his expulsion, bin Laden settled in Sudan in 1992. He established a well-defended compound, and from 1992-1996, the U.S. monitored his activities daily. By 1996, U.S. sanctions made Sudan unsafe, and he returned to Afghanistan, which was now under the control of the Taliban. He became the personal guest of the Taliban's first leader, Mullah Mohammed Omar. In August 1996, bin Laden issued a formal declaration of war against the United States. Al-Qaeda had already been active. 1993, a truck bomb was detonated outside the North Tower of the World Trade Center in Manhattan. 1998, simultaneous truck bombings targeted the United States embassies in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and Nairobi, Kenya. The 1998 attacks resulted in the deaths of 298 people, with thousands more injured. Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda were responsible, and he was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The 1998 embassy attacks confirmed bin Laden's place on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, marking him as a high-value threat. But for bin Laden, these deadly attacks were just a rehearsal. His foremost complaint, the presence of American troops in the Arabian Peninsula, demanded a retaliation so vast, so shocking, that it would change the course of modern history. The scale of his next plot was unimaginable, and it was headed for American soil: the 9/11 attacks. By late 1998, bin Laden approved the plan proposed by Al-Qaeda affiliate Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Over the next 2 years, 19 hijackers were selected and established in terrorist cells across the U.S. On the morning of September 11, 2001, those 19 hijackers boarded 4 commercial airline planes. 8:46 a.m., American Airlines. Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 hit the west wall of the Pentagon. 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93 crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought the hijackers. In total, the 9/11 attacks killed over 2,700 people, making them the most devastating terrorist attacks in world history. Though bin Laden initially denied involvement, he unequivocally stated he was responsible in a 2004 video, claiming the purpose was revenge for destruction across the Middle East, manhunt, war, and escape. At the time of the attacks, bin Laden was believed to be hiding in the mountains of Afghanistan. President George W. Bush quickly authorized the use of force. Since the Taliban sheltered Al-Qaeda and refused to hand bin Laden over, the regime became a target. The U.S. invasion began in October 2001. By early December, the Taliban had surrendered, but the mission to bring bin Laden to justice had failed. U.S. forces conducted a campaign in the Tora Bora cave complex, where bin Laden was believed to be hiding. The invasion had toppled the Taliban, but the mission to bring bin Laden to justice had failed. He was gone, escaping into the mountains of Pakistan. The $25 million bounty on his head made him the most wanted man on earth. Yet he vanished almost without a trace. For nearly a decade, the world searched for a man who had seemingly disappeared into thin air. But he wasn't far. He was living in plain sight. The end, Abbottabad. Following his escape, bin Laden spent the vast majority of his time in Pakistan. He eventually moved into a new, purpose-built compound in the city of Abbottabad in northern Pakistan. The compound was enormous, surrounded by a concrete perimeter, fence up to 5.5 meters high and topped with barbed wire. Bin Laden was likely living there from 2006 onwards. His undoing was his over-reliance on a trusted courier. In 2009, U.S. intelligence identified Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, a close confidant, and tracked him to the peculiar building in Abbottabad. Though the CIA never obtained a photograph proving bin Laden was inside, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming by early 2011. On May 1, 2011, U.S. President Barack Obama authorized Operation Neptune Spear. May 2, 2011, 2. Black Hawk helicopters carrying 24 Navy SEALs landed at the compound. One helicopter crashed, but no SEALs were injured. A brief firefight ensued. The SEALs proceeded to the 3rd floor, where they found bin Laden. Their orders were to kill, not apprehend. Bin Laden was shot and killed at 12:39 a.m. local time. His body was disposed of, quickly at an undisclosed location, at sea within 24 hours to comply with Islamic tradition.